10,000 years ago, a small wild cat walked out of the wilderness. It was not captured. It was not trained. It appeared at the edge of a human settlement and never left. Most people assume cats were domesticated by humans, that we saw them, caught them, bred them into submission the way we did with every other animal. That is not what happened. What actually happened is the strangest origin story in nature. Farming created grain stores. Grain stores attracted rodents. Rodents created the perfect opening for a predator with sharp teeth and absolute patience. The African wildcat saw the opportunity before humans even understood there was a deal on the table. This was not affection. This was mathematics. A single grain silo in Neolithic Jericho could support a population of mice that would take a wildcat years to find hunting alone in the wilderness. The boldest cats, the ones that could tolerate human proximity without panicking, ate better. They bred more. Their offspring inherited that tolerance and pushed the boundary closer. Generation by generation, the cat engineered its own survival without a single human making a conscious decision to domesticate it. The deal was struck before humans knew they were negotiating. In 2007, researchers at Oxford University analyzed DNA from 979 cats collected across 5 continents. They were looking for the origin point. Where did domestication begin? The answer surprised them. Not many origins. One origin. Every domestic cat alive today traces back to a single population, the African wildcat, Felis lybica, one small predator in the Fertile Crescent that made a calculation 10,000 years ago and rewrote the rules of survival. The leopard-cat in China tried the same strategy. It failed. The African wildcat succeeded. The difference tells you everything about what domestication actually requires. Around 5,400 years ago, in the millet fields of northern China, another small predator saw the same opportunity. The leopard cat crept into human settlements. It hunted rodents. It tolerated proximity. For over 3,000 years, it lived alongside Chinese farmers, following the exact pathway that worked for the African wildcat. And then it disappeared. Around 150 AD, the leopard cat vanished from the archaeological record entirely. The Han Dynasty collapsed. Agricultural systems fell apart. Grain stores emptied. When the food supply disappeared, the leopard cats walked back into the wilderness. They had spent 3,000 years near humans and learned nothing permanent. They never crossed the line from tolerated visitor to irreplaceable companion. The African wildcat crossed that line. The relationship your cat inherited required something the leopard cat never developed. In 2004, archaeologist Jean-Denis Vigne discovered something on the Mediterranean island of Cyprus, a burial site, 9,500 years old. Inside, a human skeleton lay beside a cat skeleton, not thrown in randomly, deliberately placed, positioned facing the same direction, separated by only 40 centimeters. Someone 9,500 years ago loved their cat enough to bury it beside them. This is not a working relationship. This is emotional attachment. The cat had become more than a rodent control system. It had become sacred. By the time of ancient Egypt, that transformation was complete. The goddess Bastet started as a lioness, a solar deity of war and vengeance carved in stone during the 3rd millennium before Christ. But something shifted in the 1st millennium before Christ. The lioness softened into a domestic cat. This was not artistic preference. This tracked a biological reality unfolding across the Nile Delta. Cats were not just tolerated, they were worshipped. Temples bred them by the thousands. Killing a cat, even accidentally, carried the death penalty. When a family cat died, the household went into mourning. They shaved their eyebrows. They mummified the body with the same care given to human royalty. Millions of cat mummies have been recovered from Egyptian burial sites. Millions. The cat curling on your sofa tonight had ancestors that were treated as gods. But here is where the story twists, in a direction no one expected. In the 1800s, British merchants discovered those millions of cat mummies buried in the Egyptian desert. They dug them up by the ton, shipped them to Liverpool, ground them into powder, sold them as agricultural fertilizer to English farmers. A creature worshipped as a god for 3,000 years became industrial fertilizer. The same cats bred for sacrifice to honor Bastet were dug up 2 millennia later and spread across fields to grow crops. The irony cuts so deep it is almost unbearable. An animal sacred enough to warrant the death penalty for killing became a commodity measured by weight and sold for profit. This is not a dignified end to the Egyptian chapter. This is a complete inversion of meaning. But the cat survived that indignity the same way it survived everything else, by being irreplaceable. While Egypt was transforming cats into gods, the animals themselves were spreading across the globe on their own terms. Viking longships carried cats across the North Atlantic. Roman merchant vessels brought them to Britain. Islamic traders moved them along the Silk Road into Asia. Wherever grain went, cats followed. Wherever humans built cities, cats walked in uninvited and made themselves essential. And they did this while giving up almost nothing. The domestic dog genome is radically different from its wolf ancestor. 14,000 years of selective breeding reshaped its brain, its body, its behavior. The dog surrendered independence to become part of the human family. The domestic cat genome remains almost identical to the African wildcat still living in the deserts of North Africa and the Middle East. Genetically, your house cat is barely different from the wild predator that walked into a grain store 10,000 years ago. The cat did not surrender. It negotiated a deal where it kept everything and lost nothing. It is still a solitary hunter. It still kills for pleasure. It still marks territory. It still operates on its own schedule. You do not own a cat. You share space with a wild predator that chooses to tolerate your presence as long as the arrangement benefits it. If every human vanished tomorrow, your cat would not mourn. It would not search for you. It would walk back into the wilderness it never truly left and survive just fine without you. The dog would struggle. The horse would panic. The cow would be helpless. The cat would adapt in less than a generation. That is not cruelty. That is the terms of the original deal. The cat looked at 10,000 years of human civilization and asked one question: what is the minimum I have to give up to access unlimited food, shelter, and safety? The answer was almost nothing. It had to tolerate proximity. That is the entire list. It did not have to obey. It did not have to love. It did not have to change its nature or surrender its independence or become part of a pack. It walked out of the wilderness with nothing but the ability to kill rodents and a tolerance for being near the most dangerous species on Earth. It turned that into godhood. Then it survived the collapse of that godhood and spread to every continent anyway. No other animal in history has negotiated a deal that one-sided and made it stick for 10,000 years. Every other domesticated animal gave up freedom and got survival. The cat kept freedom and still got survival. That is not domestication. That is a treaty between equals, and the cat wrote the terms.